You would not believe your eyes if this actually went down. And no, I couldn't think of a rhyme to follow up the intro with that, but either way, today we're talking about an idea that we've actually gone over before on this YouTube channel. Believe it or not, it's one of the most popular videos on the channel, and it was made a few years ago. So when this idea popped up once again on a recent episode of the Steve Dangle podcast, I was like, you know what? Last time we talked about this, we didn't really dive too deep into it. We just kind of highlighted that the idea was there. So why not this time around? Let's go out there and talk about it. Today we're going over one of the best players of all time. A guy who, for the latter part of, let's say, the 2000s and 2010s-ish, was the best player in the NHL. He was considered number one, generational. He still is generational, and it's kind of crazy because now he's 35 years old and still going out there and putting up beastly numbers. Let's talk today about Sidney Crosby. Now, before we dive into what it is we're talking about, as we have said, Crosby has been really good this year at 36 years old, $8.7 million a year till the end of 2024-2025. He is at 27 points in 26 games played right now, on pace for about 85 points in 82 games played, and roughly on pace for about 47 goals. This guy has not had a 50-goal season in over a decade. The last time he did that was in 2009-2010. So, Crosby, for a good portion of this year, has just been so dominant in terms of being able to produce, being able to score goals. You could say the assist number isn't really up to his normal standard because he normally gets a lot more assists than he does goals. I mean, there's the few odd years where he actually has roughly the same amount of assists as he does goals, but never really like this, where now he actually has more goals. Either way, though, the Penguins haven't really been the best this season. Their situation with Erik Karlsson has needed sorting out. Who knew that for Erik Karlsson, who was so good by himself after Brent Burns got traded away from San Jose, is now struggling, quote-unquote, after being placed onto a team that also boasts the likes of guys like Chris Letang, etc. So, interesting dynamic there in Pittsburgh. The Pens aren't really doing too well. Malkin's still producing. Carlsson is producing a decent amount, not as much as he was last year, not a 100-point pace defenseman. And then, of course, you still have some of the other guys doing what they're doing. Gensel, Rust, the names go on. But for Sidney Crosby, he has been so good, especially for a guy who is 36 years old, that the conversation as to the future, which has always been in the back of our minds, ends up bringing itself up once more when you acknowledge a conversation made on the Steve Dangle podcast. Now, like I said, this idea that we're talking about was talked about on the channel before, 2 years ago in 2021. This was the video in question that we made. Sidney Crosby trade rumors, Pittsburgh Penguins rebuild. In this video, what we did was we talked about a sports radio show, The Instigators, WGR 550 Sports Talk Radio in Buffalo, wherein Marty Baron went out there and tweeted about their show's content. One of the episodes in the summer of 2021 of The Instigators went over an idea that was floating around saying that Sidney Crosby may actually end his NHL career on a different team than Pittsburgh. Now, in the video we made, we talked about the idea of Crosby requesting a trade. Oh, if the Penguins go under new management and if they want to rebuild because Malkin and Crosby and Letang are getting older, then maybe they could trade Crosby away and get some stuff for him, etc., etc. That was 2 years ago. And now, in 2023, there is new management. It's Kyle Dubas at the helm of the Pittsburgh Penguins, but there isn't any inkling of a rebuild whatsoever. This is a guy who wants to win with this core, which is pretty admirable because you're giving Crosby, Letang, Malkin the final opportunities to go out there and still secure some hardware, but we're 2 years into the future from the last time we had talked about this video, and Sidney Crosby's contract is expiring in 2 years. So, we are closer now than ever before to Sidney Crosby's inevitable contract expiration, which could lead to a potential UFA situation if he decides not to re-sign. And because the guy has shown zero signs of slowing down, he's scoring more goals than ever, he is on pace for roughly a point per game season again, we had ourselves this clip from the recent Steve Dangle podcast episode where the folks on the show talk about this particular idea. Steve Steve Dangle, former Sportsnet guy and current YouTube podcasting guy. Everybody knows about Steve Dangle. He is a legend. He ends up saying in the show that a lot of the whispers he's been hearing over the last 3 to 4 years say that there is a solid chance that Sidney Crosby could end his career elsewhere than Pittsburgh. Then, on the same clip, by the way, it will be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and listen to the audio yourself. Steve Dangle directly says, hey, two teams that everybody kind of talks about roughly, the Montreal Canadiens are a team that people are linking Crosby to in the future, which is an idea we did bring up because Sidney Crosby's dad actually was drafted by the Canadiens back in the 80s. He never played for the Habs, but he was drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. Plus the fact that Sidney Crosby, of course, growing up in Nova Scotia, closest NHL team, you could say, in Canada was Montreal, so there could be a link there. Dangle also goes out there and says that Crosby could go to Colorado because he would want to reunite with McKinnon. And I say reunite loosely because it's not like these guys were ever playing together, quote-unquote. Of course, there are the odd Team Canada moments here and there, but still, Sidney Crosby has been mentioned twice in these two capacities in two very separate timelines. 2 years ago, we talked about this because it was written about in an article. Now we're talking about it again because Steve Dangle's saying that some of the whispers have led to this conclusion. So, now that it's 2023, I'm asking y'all Habs fans, I'm asking y'all Avs fans, what are your thoughts on the idea of Sidney Crosby potentially expiring as a Pittsburgh Penguin sometime in 2025 and then signing elsewhere to one of your teams? If he goes to Montreal and he becomes the guy playing second-line center behind Nick Suzuki, what do the Habs look like there? If he heads over to Colorado and you play him with McKinnon, what happens in that situation? If you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, how does this entire conversation make you feel? Because having Crosby, who is one of the GOATs, literally, be in this position where now we're talking about his departure in a season where things aren't going your way. He's still scoring points, but all the results that you wanted, the consistency throughout the lineup, the wins, they're not going. Your goaltending is scoring more goals than your power play is. It's so strange in Pittsburgh right now. So how does it make you feel that because things don't look all too great, everybody's talking about whether or not this could actually be a thing? We brought it up 2 years ago. It's being brought up again now. To be fair to all of the doubters out there, I will say a lot of the comment section of this Steve Dangle clip from the podcast is getting just so angry about it. Like, the entire show is getting flamed because everyone's like, yeah, no, Crosby's not going to leave. Come on, man. Why are you talking about this? Oh, yeah, fake insider, whatever. Oh, you're hearing whispers. Oh, what does that mean? You're just making it up. Stuff like that, right? People are nasty. So Instagram comment sections can be very vile at times, especially when you talk about a ridiculous idea like Sidney Crosby playing for some other team. But because we had talked about this 2 years ago, I was like, yeah, you know, this is not new. So why not go out there, use this opportunity to bring the idea up once more and ask a broader question? Because, I mean, we've got more fans on this YouTube channel now than we had 2 years ago. More viewers, too, so that's awesome to see. What are your thoughts on this entire idea? Do you think it's actually plausible? Do you think Sidney Crosby signs with a Colorado Avalanche team to play with McKinnon, or with a hometown Montreal Canadiens team to end off his NHL career? The Steve Dangle clip specifically has a whole bunch of examples of other guys that we all consider to be some of the best players of all time playing for other teams. Matt Sundin going to Vancouver, Martin Brodeur going over to St. Louis, and then you have all these other things like, I mean, if you wanted to say even now, Patrick Kane is a Red Wing. Jonathan Quick is doing so well as a New York Ranger. Things are never predictable. They're never set in stone. So, for one of the best players the NHL has ever seen in Sidney Crosby, does he fall under that same boat? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about the idea of Crosby going over to Montreal or Colorado. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.